Passively along for the way.
Yeah, passively along.
Passively.
Passive in the sense that it's
letting inertia carry.
Yeah.
The inertia of the operation of the personality carries things along.
Right. So you have this personality factor that's controlling the action or the activity of the organism.
You mean at the outset before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So to your point, ultimately the idea with the process is that there's something else that can happen, and that's that ultimately the essential part of ourselves can become stabilized and grow and become the center of gravity of our existence, such that the essence becomes the active element and the personality becomes passive to the essence, and that we can use our wonderful attributes of personality and our quirks, our warts, our talents, all of the things that we have, we can use it, but we use it in service of something else. And the interesting part of this analogy, in the fourth way, everything happens with three forces. There's active, passive, and there's reconciling. And in the beginning stage, the thing that sort of keeps the personality and the essence in this locked sort of role where the personality is dominating and essence is passive, is the force of life. The force of our lives constantly reifies and continues to keep us kind of in this place where we're constantly reacting mechanically to these outside forces that are coming in. So we have to find something internal, something inner, to become that reconciling role, and that's part of what shifts us. And that inner thing is our practice, is our work on self. It's turning towards something higher or more within, if you will, that becomes more of a factor in the source of impressions that have gravity with us. We tune into something deeper in ourselves. We tune into something, if you will, higher in the universe, or more absolute in the universe. And that allows life to be, as Walter was saying, a dream. It becomes less of a reality, and it becomes more of a dream. And what becomes real is something deep within.
So, the problem, as Stuart pointed out earlier, is that it's easy to explain why or what's happening and what should be happening in place of what is actually happening for the most part in most of our lives most of the time. But actually changing that is the tricky part. Why is that? Well, we've just talked about a situation where these voices in our heads are problems in the sense that we identify with them. And when we identify with them, then they become the master, and they're the tail that wags the dog, essentially. So that is a problem. But what most people do with that situation when it's described to them is that they'll decide that, oh, this thought, that's a problem. And maybe that thought, that's a problem. But the trick is to recognize that any and every identification is a problem. It's the habit of identification itself that's the problem, not this particular identification, that particular identification. There are dozens, probably hundreds of psychological techniques to rearrange the deck chairs in the ocean liner of our minds to something that we think will be more pleasant to hang out in. But as long as we're as long as we are engaging in the habit of identification itself, we're just going to, that habit of identification is just going to glom onto some other deck chair, even if we decide to release this particular one. And that's the tricky part.
Yeah, I'd actually, we got into sort of details here. I started my last riff with the comment that this is very difficult. And I want to reiterate that because one of the hardest things I certainly have found, and I continue to struggle with this, and that's after decades of practice, recognizing when I'm identified.
How would you define identification?
Yeah.
I realize that identification is the cause of all suffering.
So there's a
what is?
Okay, so identification. I can tell you when you think that there's a feeling that you associate with I. There's a sense you have with me. Like for instance, my hand. You have a sense that there's no separation. That this is your hand, or your hand, not my hand. Although you probably think this is your hand too, but she's my mom. Yeah, but there's a very deep, energetic sense of continuity. This is your hand. So imagine now applying that same sense of familiarity, and just you wouldn't think of cutting your hand off. It's a part of you. So imagine that same sense of connection and familiarity with an emotional state that arises. They say someone upsets you, someone does something that kind of makes your vanity, you feel like you were offended or something like that, to use a negative emotional example. That when that happens, when we are identified with the feeling that arises, we see that as absolutely valid. This is who we are. We couldn't possibly not be right or wrong in that moment. There isn't like perspective or anything like that. There's simply this complete sense of I-ness with that manifestation. Now take that same model, not just with an emotion, but with a complex of thoughts and an energetic state of tension in the body, and you have a sort of an android three-centered manifestation that feels absolutely familiar to us. A good example for me the other day, I can't remember where I was, but I saw this in a way that I hadn't seen it before. I was feeling, I was at a music workshop. It was kind of an all-day, like 5-hour shakuhachi workshop where I was working with my teacher with a group of people. And toward the end of it, I was noticing that I was starting to watch the clock. It's like, when is this going to be done? Because it was real work, because we were having to put like active conscious attention on our bodies and on our playing. I noticed something I hadn't really seen clearly before, was that the complex of thoughts that were sort of arising about, it's time to go, I was starting to fantasize about being in my car driving home and stuff like that, was in reaction to an energetic state in my body. And the energetic state in my body was a certain kind of tiredness, because I'd been on my feet for hours. But I was identified with it. I didn't see any difference between it. As soon as I caught that, I could simply attend to changing that energy and shift my attention. And then it was as easy as Rob says, I can just redirect my attention. The problem here, and the reason I say this is hard, is that I had to see, and this is after 25 years of practice, I had to see that I was identified in that moment. And my challenge to all of you who approach these ideas, even if you have some years of spiritual practice under your belt, is it's very difficult to actually recognize the stark reality of the identified state of our ordinary consciousness. It's very difficult, where we're so used to, if I feel this particular way, then I'm going to do this. I feel hungry, I'm going to go eat. I feel tired, I'm going to go sleep, or all of these things. But all of this is us being identified with body-mind states that are functioning in this organism, and those states are being triggered by things outside of ourselves. That is not essence functioning. That is the machine being the active force in our lives.